What's up guys, my name is Anna, and let's move on from the fact that my hair looks like Lewis Hamilton's 2015 haircut. Thank you. So in the last video we looked at the first game in the franchise, the Need for Speed 1, and today we're going to be looking at the sequel that came out in 1997, Need for Speed 2. So strap yourself in, cause like in the last episode, this is another game I've never played before. Right, so Need for Speed 2 came out on March 31st, 1997 for the PC and PlayStation 1 and were developed by EA Canada and EA Seattle. Both games look the same on a gameplay perspective, other than that the PC release has a different HUD to the PlayStation version and it has more AI players. My guess would be that EA Canada probably took the lead as they did with the first game when EA published it. We're gonna be looking at the PlayStation emulator version as... yeah. For starters, I think the intro is actually pretty sick, and the main menu is a huge improvement compared to the last game. And that will be sort of a main talking point in today's video. We got game setup, location, player car, opponents, race, and options. In the options section, I've set up my controller settings in advance, but in case you're wondering what it is, here you go. So we got single race, tournament, and knockout. There's also an arcade and simulation setting, and keeping it on arcade means we're keeping it nice and simple. When you select it to simulation, you'll get to mess with the car's performance manually. Single race is just your standard select any track to your avail whenever you please, and when you beat an event, there really isn't a reward. But in tournament, however, it's more of an objective to finish each event in order, and it locks you out from doing anything else. The challenge is to become champion of each event, and lastly, we have the game mode Knockout. It's again a Grand Prix style of setting where you're doing a total of 7 races back to back, and each player in last place of each individual race gets eliminated from the Grand Prix. Then we get to courses of the game. There's a total of 7, all including 2 different soundtracks. So for the first track we got Proving Grounds, a 5.1 kilometer track in Norway, supposedly right next to a fjord given the icy climate outside of a course. This is basically your tutorial stage and it's nice and simple. I'll also start talking about the feel of the game here. While overall I think the feel of the car is better in this game than it is in the first game, in the Need for Speed 1, it's usually just kinda a shot in the dark for me as how well things will go, but in this game, I actually feel more in control. When braking in a corner though, it can be very tricky as your car will be put into a power slide kind of state. Fighting the car here can be a little difficult at times, but I have the least difficulties dealing with it in the F50. I never really use the handbrake, and sometimes it's better entering the corners just letting go of the gas. But anyway, next up we got Outback in Sydney, Australia, which is a track with a length of 7.5 kilometers. You start in the city and you have these twists and turns. It's not really a big deal, but then you get to the Outback section into the desert and there is this huge ramp. Now, due to how this game's controls are, even a ramp like this can be really tricky to navigate through properly. Upon landing, you usually have to fight the car in order to prevent yourself crashing into this wall. The rest of the track is fine though, and usually I climb back to the CPU ahead of me. Next up we've got North Country in Northern Europe. The game actually never tells us directly where the track is located, but if I had to guess, it'd be either in the north of Switzerland or south of Germany, as the in-game announcer tells us it has an autobahn. In the south of Germany there are also mountains, and both countries are German speaking, so yeah, take it for what you will. Anyway, this 7.5 kilometer track is a bit more of a roller coaster, as we start off with a double lane public road and enter this amusement park, followed by a rocky section. We then enter a small town where you have this very conveniently placed bridge. Yeah, some sick bastard thought this was a great idea. Over the entire course of the track, you're actually constantly braking and making these sharp turns, and it can be hard for the player, as how earlier I described that these cars can be a bit of a pain in the ass to manage when braking. We then move on to some grasslands where we also have this turn. Yeah, great. Not a lot of fun. We then enter a tunnel, a forest, and another tunnel, and that's the track. Next up we got Pacific Spirit, a track in Canada that's 8.1 kilometers long. This track is pretty narrow, basically everywhere, and I kept crashing at this section of the course, due to just not being able to nail the breaking point. The seaside portion of the map is nice though, and you'll even hear some seagulls in the background, but overall I like the course and don't have much to say. It's nice. Then next up we have Mediterraneo in Greece. It's a 6.5 kilometer track that starts just at a hill directly down the city. So this track has you seeing the city and then some scenic landscape, but the course itself is pretty batshit crazy. First off, we have a section of the town that's just like, this kinda really sucks. When exiting the town, you're gonna want to keep it on the road, because the second you go off-road, you're being launched into the sky. I have no idea what they were thinking, but this is a feature, I suppose. Then a little down the road we have another bridge section where, you guessed it, you're gonna want to not do whatever is happening here. Then we get to this tunnel and oh my bad. I kinda thought this was a ramp, similar to how there was one earlier on the track. So, sorry. But most upsetting of all, later in the course, there's just columns, and they're just put into the ground like that. What sick bastard thought this was a great idea? Anyway, that's it. That's really it, and you get to the end of the lap. The track overall looks pretty beautiful, but kinda at the expense of gameplay. Right, 2 more to go. Mystic Peaks in Nepal is next. It's a 7.6 kilometer track, but don't let that distance fool you. This track is insane. You're starting off at this little village, and from there on out it's just mountains, caves, ramps, and whatever else. For the first half of the track, it's literally impossible to drive at like fast speeds, and some of these ramps are a little unforgiving, as in you can't really see what's ahead of you. I honestly do like the challenge, and in some corners of the track the game is quite forgiving, but most of the time you're dying, that's what's up. I also do think the track is quite unique and visually appealing, so I don't know, make of this track what you will. And lastly, we have Monolithic Studios in Los Angeles. It can be unlocked by winning the Knockout Race series, and this track again follows the theme of just being some insane, mad track designed by the developers. We start off outside of his neighborhood, it's nighttime, nothing much, and then we enter this building and we're in Old Town Road. Then we enter some space colony kind of section, followed by some futuristic road in the sky, and there's buildings around us, and what a way to top it off by one last trip to the clouds. As the bend follows, we enter a nice grassy swamp-like area with the Loch Ness monster chilling in the background, and there's several of them. And then we also got some UFOs, of course. I mean, why wouldn't we? And just as you thought it was done, we enter a burning factory to round off the lap. That's it. All of these stage themes are meant to be referencing different films, and a lot of these do look like stereotypical movie scenes from like any Hollywood film, but I wouldn't have ever guessed that if I didn't look that up, to be honest. In the special edition version, there is also a Mexican track. It looks like this. But we're playing the PlayStation 1 version, and so we'll look at that another time. Anyway, let's talk about the vehicles in the game. Let's start off with the car I drive the most, the McLaren F1. Now, I would probably say that this car is completely overpowered. However, you know how earlier I mentioned when braking you go into like a power slide and it's kinda hard to maintain your car on the track. Well, that's where I kinda have a few struggles with this car, but otherwise, it's my go-to option as it's just simply too fast. Second off, the car we have on the cover. The beautiful Ferrari F50, which I probably have played the second most. It is by far a bit slower, but I think it has better handling than that the F1 does, as how I mentioned earlier, whenever you land or brake into a turn, you're kinda sliding everywhere. Each car also has its own in-game graph displaying its stats, but I don't know, bro, you can tell me whether or not they're actually accurate. Then next up we have the Jaguar XJ220. Always been a childhood favorite car of mine, always loved it. Yeah, it's a big thumbs up. Then we have the Lotus GT1 and the Lotus Esprit V8. The GT1 was meant to compete in GT1 classes against the likes of the McLaren F1 GTR and other Le Mans type variants of endurance vehicles, but it didn't really work as they didn't have enough resources, and the Esprit is just a fantastic car, look at it, yeah. Then we get into the prototype vehicles that only really existed as concept cars. We got the Isdera Kommandator 112. That one, it's meant to be this German concept car that never came to be. I don't know, I kinda don't like the front of it, but the rest of it looks pretty cool. Then we got the Ital Design Cala. It was meant to be this Lamborghini twin concept car type thing. It just kinda screams Lamborghini, whichever way you look at it. And we have the Ford GT90, which later went on to become the Ford GT. We also got the Ford Indigo, which is the only other unlockable thing in this game. It's meant to be a futuristic type of roadster car and destined to be a classic. Yeah guys, that didn't really happen. For the first time ever, you can also change the color of each vehicle. There is like 16 different options you're limited to, but it's a start, and then the settings option is what allows you to change your car's performance. In this little sub menu over here we have history, and it will just show you some of the car manufacturer's most iconic vehicles. We have slideshow, which will just show you a few images of the vehicles that are in game. I can imagine this being quite nice, as in 1997 you wouldn't have really gotten thousands of images of these vehicles if you googled them. And when we select video, moving on the menu we have opponents, which will allow you to adjust the difficulty of the opponents, and you can change the grid to just be a 1v1, have the entire grid just drive one specific car, or everyone driving random cars. You can also set it to no one, in which this kinda just becomes like a time trial mode. Race is just how you'll finally start the action, and in options we can adjust our control scheme as I told you earlier. On this emulator it keeps undoing my saved inputs though whenever I reboot up the game, so I just kinda have a save state placed here permanently. In audio we can adjust the sound setting, it's as simple as that. Memory card, this is kinda irrelevant, we have save states. Credits is self-explanatory, and in passwords... No. No. Hell fucking yes! So these passwords allow you to become a various amount of different stage items, whether they are pedestrian vehicles or stage props. This is amazing. Now, depending if you're playing the PC version, special release, or PlayStation 1 version, you get different cheat codes to your avail. I think it's hilarious how I can drive as a Mazda Miata in this game and it's still completely shit and uncompetitive. Even with the super engine you have to be really pushing, and I don't like how every time you touch the side of this wall it sounds like bats squeaking. What's up with that? That's actually for every car by the way, but I'm just gonna throw it in there. You can also be an Audi Quattro, old-ass Citroen, a huge school bus, an SL500, or hell, even a UFO. It's whatever you're feeling like today. There's also a nighttime cheat code turning all the stages into nighttime stages, but it's exclusive to PC and special edition versions, and in terms of modding, there are also a few things here. A track editor. You'll have to download Car Editor in order to add community-added custom vehicles, and there's also a performance editor. I can only promote you trying to install these things yourself, as I'm playing this on an emulator, of course. Upon finishing a stage, you'll be taken to this menu where you can replay the race likewise as to in the first game. There are many different camera settings. Too many in fact, and I haven't told you guys earlier, but during races you can enable different camera point of views by a press of a button. Like last time, the driver point of views displaying the cockpit kinda looks like it was just ripped off from a real life image and then put into the game, but I do really appreciate the attention to detail. Last up, I've mentioned to you guys how you can play as pedestrian vehicles with using cheat codes and passwords, but you haven't seen any of that footage throughout the video. What's up with that, huh? Okay, well, I'll tell you. So if we go back into the opponent setting, we can turn the traffic setting on if you're just challenging one single opponent. By doing so, you'll be racing each other through traffic like in the first game. This time, however, there are no police. Yeah, there's just no police, and the traffic around the track usually only starts appearing after a minute or so. And when comparing this game a lot to the Need for Speed 1, this game has the same amount of playable vehicles if we exclude, this. In the last game, there were 4 regular races and 3 broken down into, 3 sprint races connected to each other. So that would lead to a total of 13 different events, while this game still only has 7. Now, the PC release of this game is supposed to have a total of 12 players, which is more than the 8 there is in the last game, and still, if we want to keep comparing this to other games, for example Gran Turismo, I think it's quite a bit off. Gran Turismo did come out much later in 1997, but it included 11 courses, all reversible, but 2 of them, and a total of 180 cars even. I don't know if you count most of them as an entirely separate car, what's the difference between these 4 Supras? Literally nothing, only the name. And real quick, before we wrap things up, without messing around with too many of the options throughout the game setting, trying to gain access to certain settings are really strange and confusing to me. Earlier for the script I wrote about how I was unable to access these driving settings due to it being grayed out. Now, if this is grayed out for you, it's because the in-game setup, you must have the race style changed to simulation. Otherwise you'll not be able to customize it. Now I get it, but it was confusing at first, and likewise to the traffic setting. You can't enable the traffic option, but that's only on the Proving Ground course. It's fine on the other courses, and you must have it set to a 1v1. So yeah, it's a bit puzzling at first, and it's not really informative, but I kinda get it. And that's gonna be it, guys. So, feelings, opinions about the game. Well, I do actually like the gameplay much better than in the first Need for Speed. Like I said earlier, I think whenever I play Need for Speed 1, it's just kind of a gamble whether or not, I actually do something good and the controls kind of function to my liking, and yeah. In terms of music, I actually really like the music in this game. I think it's pretty sick. Especially the main menu music, that is actually really awesome and actual good music. So yeah, huge thumbs up. Graphics are okay. I mean, we're still in the 90s here, you can't expect that much, but I think it's actually better looking than in the first game. In the first game there's literally several vehicles that look like they're made of, they look like they're made for the DS, they have 50 polys. And no offense, but I mean, we are a bit later, we are a few years later, I guess, in terms of Need for Speed games. And then also in terms of sound, I think the game is pretty decent. It excels compared to the first game. A lot of the theme in this game is kind of that it excels better than in the first Need for Speed, and it's supposed to. It came out later, but like, you know, you still have this a similar amount of content compared to the first Need for Speed. Like, you have the same amount of vehicles, you have like kind of the same amount of courses, not really, and then like in terms you don't have cops. It doesn't bother me that it's a Need for Speed game that doesn't have cops whatsoever. It doesn't keep me awake at night, I swear. But no, that's a joke for real. It doesn't bother me, and it kind of doesn't help that like Gran Turismo like has its head poking around the corner, and then when that finally released, it was just kind of a bombshell on any racing game at the time. With that said and done, we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace the fuck out!